The story that's most requested of me every year is the story about pickled fingers. And as many times as I've told it, I think people have enjoyed it, so here it is. If you leave the camp and take a left, go down the end of the road to where the pond is, down the end of the road, and take a right at the fork, there's a house that has a plaque in front of it in honor of a man named John Kennard, who was the original settler of what they call Cracker Valley. And the Kennard family lived there, and they had one son. It was John Jr. And John Jr. was a bright kid, and he eventually wanted to become a doctor. And he went to a school, main medical school, which is at Bowdoin College, and he graduated there in 1885, I believe. I have all these materials at camp. I'm doing this from home, but I have the materials at camp that shows diploma, etc. And John Kennard Jr. graduated from Bowdoin College Medical School. He became a doctor. He lived with his parents, who eventually died, and he's a country doctor. He's a well-known doctor. He's a very kind gentleman, and he's well-known in the area. He was the only doctor in the area. One night, as he was sleeping, somebody came to the door, rapping at the door. Dr. Kennard, come quick. He woke up. He said, who's there? He said, it's Ephraim, the local farmer. Ephraim, it's Ephraim. My wife is sick. She needs help. So he says, go back to her. He says, I'll come to her, said the doctor. So he got up and got dressed. He went out to the barn, took the horse and his buggy, and he went to visit Ephraim's wife. She was very sick. He thought it might be appendicitis. He gave her some medicine to calm her. And he said, look, rest easy. I'll see you in the morning. And he drove back that night to his house in the buggy with the horse. Some animal ran across the road and spooked the horse. And the horse reared up and threw Dr. Kennard out of the cart. As he lay on the ground, the horse ran forward and the cart wheels ran over his right hand. And they almost severed the fingers. And there was blood coming out of it, and Dr. Kennard lost the blood. And he lost consciousness. And when he woke up a couple of hours later, the sun was coming up. The horse was standing there still, and his fingers were dangling from his hand, his 3 fingers. He realized what had happened. He got up, he held himself back into the cart, he went home, and he completed the cutting off of his fingers. His fingers were useless. He bandaged himself up, and from that day on he was a changed man. He became very bitter. He realized that he could no longer be a doctor or a surgeon, could not serve the people, and he said, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen to me? And he became a recluse. He bought some land on the corner of the road where the Pickled Fingers house once stood, and he decided he was going to build a house there and move into a big house and get rid of his house where he was. And on New Year's Eve, he was going to have a party. He was going to be a new man. He was going to have a party and invite people to the old house. He was going to move out of into the new house, which they were building. And he had some candles. And as he walked across the room to put the candles on the mantelpiece, he tripped. And the candles fell down and they lit the drapes. And the house started to go up in flames. He ran out of the house, and some of the neighbors passing by saw the fire. They called the fire brigade, but it was a primitive time. There were no mechanized vehicles, and the house was a complete loss. Dr. Kennard, who was getting better mentally from his trauma of a couple of years back with his fingers, fell into complete disrepair, disuse. He became crazy. He moved into town to a hotel while they were building this house on the corner. And when the house was ready, he moved into the house. He stayed a lot by himself. He grew a beard. He was a dirty man, dirty physically. He would rarely be seen in town except when he went to get supplies. And over the years, people started disappearing in town. And if the bodies were found, they found they were missing 3 fingers. And no one knew who was doing these crimes. And one night, it was New Year's Eve one night, somebody was attacked. And they screamed for help, and people came to the rescue. And the woman said, it's Dr. Kennard who attacked me. Dr. Kennard attacked me, and he was going to cut off my fingers. So they realized who had been doing these crimes. The next morning, the sheriff went to the house, which is the house on the corner, which no longer stands. and he rapped at the door. Dr. Kennard! Dr. Kennard! No answer. Dr. Kennard! Dr. Kennard! It's the sheriff. And the door opened, and there was Dr. Kennard behind the door. Sort of a big man with a beard, looking dirty, wild-eyed. He said, "What do you want?" The sheriff said, "Where were you last night? We have reason to believe that you might have attacked a person." He said, "Get out of here. You have a search warrant?" "No." "And we have a search warrant. Come back. Forget it." Slammed the door in the sheriff's face. The sheriff went to the local judge that afternoon and got a search warrant for the house. Came back the next day and knocked on the door. "Dr. Kennard! Dr. Kennard!" No answer. "Dr. Kennard! Dr. Kennard!" No answer. So they tried the door, and the sheriff went in with his men, and the place was deserted. They walked around the house, and they went down the cellar. And there, down the cellar, were jars of pickled fingers. People's fingers had been cut off and preserved in jars down the cellar. That's part one of the pickled finger story. Part two involves the camp in 1920. The camp had just recently reopened after the Spanish flu scare, and it was 2 sessions. One session had the older boys that came up, and then during the middle of that session, younger boys came up, and the older boys sort of watched them, took care of them. The second session arrived at camp. Jack Burns was the director, and the younger boys came in, and Jack Burns greeted them and got them settled in the tents and told them some of the rules of the camp, got them settled in and got them to sleep. About midnight that night, the older boys went to the younger boys and got them up. "Get up, get up, get up, come on, get up." The younger boys said, "What's going on?" "Get up, get up." They got them out into the open. They said, "Come on with us. In order to survive at camp, you have to pass this ritual." It was actually hazing. And they walked the kids down to the road, down to the Pickled Fingers house, which was abandoned at that time. They stood in front of the house. They said, "We want you to go into that house, and if you survive the night in that house, you pass. If you don't survive the night in that house, then we'll give you trouble all the way through. You have to show that you're man enough." This is called hazing and is outlawed now, but unfortunately it was prevalent in those days. So one by one, the boys went into the house. And the next to last one in was a man named Ruby Escott. And the last one in was Tom Monoman. And Tom was a nice guy, rather simple-minded, and he was grinning, and he walked in the house. About 20 boys and all went into the house. Door shut, and it was dark in there, and the older boys waited outside. They heard the church bell in the town strike 1 o'clock, and suddenly they heard some yelling in the house, and 2 of the boys came running out saying, "I don't know what's going on in that house. I don't care what you do to me. I'm not staying in that house." And about half an hour later, 2 more boys ran out. And by 5 o'clock in the morning, all the boys had run out of that house except for Tom Monoman. And as they stood outside the house, they heard this banging noise above them. Didn't know what it was. So the older boys became a little scared. They went in the house at 5 o'clock and they said, Tommy, you can come out now. You've passed. Come on." And off in the distance, they heard this banging noise. And they walked around the bottom floor. It was all dusty and dirty, except where the kids who had been in the house had disturbed the dust and the cobwebs. And they saw a staircase going up the stairs. They walked up the stairs and they went into one room. It was an empty room. There were all kinds of old newspapers and magazines on the floor, broken glass. And they heard the banging noise coming from the other room up in the house, opposite this room. They went across a small hallway. There was a big fireplace in the middle, as I remember. The bricks going up. And they looked around the corner of this big fireplace, fire stack, and there was Tommy Monoman sitting on the ground, banging his head against the wall, and eating pickled fingers out of a jar. And there was blood coming from his head, and there was blood on the wall. And the older leader of the boys said, "Tommy, Tommy!" He looked up at them with a grin. He held out a pickled finger as if to offer them to eat. And the older boys realized there was problems. They helped Tommy up. They brought him downstairs. And they walked back to camp. And Tommy Monument was just talking nonsense. He was talking gibberish. And they couldn't get anything out of him. So they made up this story. They found Jack Burns, the director. They woke him up and said, Mr. Burns, there's been an accident at camp." And they told the story how they woke up early and they went for a walk with Tommy Monument, and he fell and he hit his head. That was the story they told Jack Burns. Well, he didn't know any better, and he took Tommy to the local doctor to look at the head. And Tommy was not talking any sense. And the doctor looked at the wound and he said, "This is not caused by one fall. This is caused by a lot of trauma to the head." And he stitched them up. They brought him back to camp. They cleaned them up. And Jack Burns questioned the older boys, but they didn't waver from the story. He never found out the truth on that. And Tommy Monument's parents were called, and they took the train to go to Portland and Cornish, and they were met in Cornish by people from the camp and brought to camp, and they brought Tommy home. They were poor people, and Tommy was he was not sane. He was not of sound mind to begin with, but this really set him off the edge. So they committed him to McLean Hospital, which is a hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts, which is noted for people who have mental difficulties. And they committed him there. That's the end of part 2 of the Pickled Finger story. Part 3 begins with Old Timers Week. Over the years, the old timers would come up to camp. And amongst the old timers who came up were Ruby Escott and his brother Hy Escott. Ruby had moved to California, but he always remembered Tommy Monument. And he and Tommy were the last of the people who had been in their house that time. All the others had died over the years. And every year when Ruby Escott came for Old Timers Week, he flew into Logan Airport on a Saturday night. Hy would pick him up on Saturday night, stay at Hy's house. And Sunday morning, Ruby Escott would go to McLean Hospital to visit Tommy Monument. Tommy Monument, all those years, lay in bed, never regained any kind of consciousness. He was really just moaning and groaning and lying there. And he'd sit by Tommy's side and he'd talk to him, even though he felt that Tommy didn't understand what he was saying. He'd reminisce about those days at camp, about that fateful night. And the nurses all got to know Ruby Escott over the years. One year when Ruby came into camp, he said to Hy, "This is my last year coming to camp. I'm too sick, I'm too old." And every year at the end of Old Timers Week, he'd walk down to the house, to the Pickled Fingers house, so he'd stand in front of it to pay homage to Tommy and to the other boys that were there. But this year he came into Logan. Hy picked him up and said, "This is my last year, brother. I'm not coming back anymore. I'm too old. I'm too sick." And Hy said, "Oh, don't be silly. You'll be back." That Sunday morning, Ruby went to McLean Hospital, and he walked in. He saw Tommy. He sat by Tommy's side, and he held his hand. He said, "Oh, Tommy, this is the last time I'm going to see of you. I won't be back anymore." And after all these years, Tommy sort of squeezed Ruby's hand, and he gave a big sigh. And Ruby called the nurses, and they all came in, and Tommy had died. Tommy went back to Hy Escott. They drove up to camp. Tommy was very sad. Ruby was very sad at the loss of his friend. Ruby arranged for Tommy's burial, went back to Hy Escott, and they drove up to camp to begin Old Timers Week. And Ruby was very sad at the loss of his friend Tommy, even though Tommy had been sort of in an unconscious state all those years. And at the end of the week, as was his custom, he'd walk down to Pickled Fingers' house, which we called the Pickled Fingers' house in those days. And he stood in front of the house. He sort of paid homage to Tommy. And this year, he said to his brother Hy, "I'm going to go down to the house my last time." And Hy said, don't go, really don't go. You're too old and too sick. He used a cane in those days, Ruby. He said, no, I have to go, I have to go. So he walked down to the house about 6 o'clock at night, and by 8 o'clock at night he did not come back. And Hyaska got very scared. He went down with a couple of guys, and as they went down to the house in the corner, they saw the door was open into the house, which had been deserted all these years. And his brother Ruby was sprawled out in the front doorway. And his hand was outstretched, his cane had fallen a little bit from it, and his 3 fingers were missing. Hyaska took his brother's body back. His brother didn't have any family, so they buried his brother up in the graveyard in the camp property. And he took his cane, and he put his cane above the door. As you go out of the dining hall, there's a cane in memory of Ruby Escott. It's still there. People ask about the cane. They call him the cane table bang. He used to take the cane and bang on the table when he wanted attention. That's the end of part 3 of Pickled Fingers. Part 4 of Pickled Fingers involves a daughter that Dr. Kennard had once had. Her name was Ruby. And after a number of years of the house being deserted, she moved into the house with her cousin, George Haley. And I got to know her well. She never talked about her father, and I never got to see much of the house. But they maintained the house. And eventually the Day family bought the house. The Days are our neighbors. They bought the house. And Ruby died and George Haley died. The house became deserted. And I got permission from the Day family to go into the house. And I took many tours of the house. Many of you people listening perhaps went with me into the house. We'd go into the house. In those days when the steps were good, we went down the cellar, and there were jars of pickled fingers still in the shelves down the cellar. We walked around the bottom of the house, and there was broken glass, and it was a mess. We went upstairs to the rooms, and there was the room to the left that the boys first went into looking for Tommy, and it's still littered with glass and broken bottles and papers and newspapers, and went across the hall to the room where Tommy was found. And there on the wall, you can see on the wallpaper, the faded wallpaper, some blood stains where Tommy was sitting eating the pickled fingers. And every so often we heard noises in the house. Took a lot of people through the tours of that house. And we'd leave the house at night. Eventually the house was knocked down. And so no sign of the house exists, except the barn still exists. And every so often I take people into the barn. And we went to the barn last year with a group of people who wanted a story with me. And Dr. Kennard was supposedly buried up in the town of Parsonsfield Cemetery. And there's a grave to him there, but I don't believe he's really there. I believe the family sort of covered him up and didn't talk about him much. And it's been a mystery as to where he disappeared to. So that's the story of Pickled Fingers, also known as Dr. John Kennard. He was a real person who really graduated Bowdoin Medical School, really practiced in the area, and was somebody who had really gone off his mind. It's a story that I love to tell, and when the house was in existence, I used to love to give tours of the house. Now, only, I think Josh Daly has a video of the tour of the house one time. It was a creepy place, scary place, but now it no longer exists, and whatever happened to Dr. Kennard, I don't know. But it was an interesting story, and it's a story that's most requested, so you've heard it now. Thank you. As I told the story, listen to it tonight. You know, the campers came here, like that, came around here. Came over here, keep the light off here. Came around here, and the leader of the camper, the veteran campers, you know, gave the terms. They told them they're going to go through this door. Then one by one, they went into the door. Next to the last one was Ruby Escott, and the last one was Tommy Martin, who sort of turned around, smiled, and went in. It's probable that he was up here in this room here, which is why they heard the banging and the moaning and the laughing to some extent. So we're going to go in here now. Look, it's there's parts of the house I'm not going to show you. The cellar has got bad steps down there, and the attic's got bad steps. But it's really been ransacked and devastated. There's also a jar on there that there were some pickled fingers on. So
ooh. A camera has never gone into Pickled Finger's house.
It may never come out.
This looks so sick in night vision.
This is West End House Camp, and we are now in Pickled Finger's house. Who is that? I'm not even kidding you guys. Who is that?
I talked in the story about they bringing the jar downstairs. This has got to be diseased.
What's in there?
It's at the top of his finger.
What?
Fuck, Bill, can I get a picture of this, please?
Yeah.
Oh my god.
It's a glass jar with pickle fingers.
Hey, get the flashlight away.
Yummy.
Look how low the ceiling is.
This has all been ransacked.
Drop it down. Oh my god.
Dude.
What? My Bill? The door is shut.
Dude, I'm so scared right now.
This is the best camera.
Oh my god.
This is the
This is the attic, which I'm not going to do.
I'm so scared of holding on
Now,
Oh my
as
god.
they sought Tommy Morgan,
I don't know.
as they saw Tommy Morgan, they came out here.
Oh my god.
Bro, I don't
Oh my
like
god. Oh
Yo, you was about to get punched.
Oh my god.
Yo, I was like the hair.
There's all kinds of old closets in here. There's rats and mice that live through here.
I'm so scared.
They had tried to electrify this place at one point. Cabinets in here.
Nothing. It's another room. Look at the wallpaper's falling
I was
off.
just like ducking. Me too, I'm scared to blow my snake, blow my face.
Now, this was a door that they really used. This was the front door. Now, as they,
Oh, in
as
the
they,
front,
ca-
huh?
as they came around here, the three guys, the leader of the guys and the two other guys, they could hear up shut lights from here. Shut lights.
Oh my god, I don't.
Shut lights. So they could hear. And they heard it coming from upstairs. So they slowly moved the lights on. They slowly came down here.
The stairs are so narrow. This is so scary. This is what I pictured it being like.
Some old magazines here. It's 1870. London.
Oh my god, this is exactly what I pictured it being like.
Yes, it is. This is West End House
Now, as
Camp.
they stood here, they realized that the sound was coming from their room. And do you remember how he described it?
Another jar.
Turn the flashlight off.
They walked across here.
Oh, there's two doors.
It's a Bible.
They looked in here. And they came into this walking.
What is that?
A dead person inside.
Mom got it.
Found Tommy wanted a huge shit somewhere over here. Standing his head against the wall. And this wall is the wall that where the van is out there.
Where's the blood? Isn't there supposedly blood?
There's something dried over here. Something dried over here.
Look, the roof's like caving in.
Where is it?
Dried over
There's blood in there?
here.
Let Diggle get up in there.
Something over here. And there's another spot one of the kids found what looks like blood somewhere.
Wait, but if they'd be seeing us right now.
Take that.
Oh my god.
They're all in there.
Oh my god. Too much banging for me.
They're freaking beasts in there too. Diggle. Listen. Hear that? Hi, sir.
Guys. I think that I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, we don't want to know what that is. Dude, this looks so scary in night vision. It looks like Blair Witch Project. Dude, these doors are so sketchy. Watch out for the stairs, they're really narrow. Oh my god. Oh my god, what was that? Oh, you scared me. How we been? We haven't been here yet. What's that? Oh my god, a knife.
What is that?
Look at the floor. Oh my god, that was so...
So we just got done with the Western House Blair Witch Project and Pickle Fingers.